and welcome back to another episode of The Pilot Principle. This is the podcast where we take a look at just the first episode of a series, the pilot, and use it to decide if we should watch the entire series, or at least the second episode. Now, on a scale of 1 to 10, how much have you missed me? Because at this point, it's probably been about 2 weeks since you've heard my lovely, lovely voice. I aim to put out 4 episodes of The Pilot Principle a month, and you were lucky enough to have 2 of me in 1 week. So I gave myself the week off last week, but now I am back. And on today's episode of The Pilot Principle, we are going to be looking at Netflix's 3-body problem. Now, if you don't know the deal, then when analysing a pilot, I look at the story, of course, as well as the characters, both the protagonists and antagonists, if there are any. I also take a look at the pace, the serial arc, where I like to do a bit of wild speculation as to where I think this series will progress to, based on the pilot episode alone. And then I look at the end of episode hook and put it all together and finally letting you know whether I think the pilot episode has done its job and why. With the formalities out of the way, let's get rolling with the pilot synopsis of 3-Body Problem as provided by Netflix UK. Unsettling events put a group of brilliant friends on edge as a mystery unravels with origins tracing back to China during the Cultural Revolution. Not gonna lie, that is not at all what I was expecting from the pilot. More so in the sense of the historical aspect of it. Not gonna lie, kind of have absolutely no idea whatsoever what 3-Body Problem is about or was about before I pressed play on it, of course. So yeah, when I read that synopsis for the pilot episode, I was like, oh, okay. It's a history thing then, is it? But don't worry, we'll get into what kind of thing it is a little bit later in the episode. Because we're first going to start with the credits, and I love the credits, but there is actually a lot of people to go through this time around, so I'm going to do my best to whiz through, keep it to a sort of 3 filmography cap where possible, so we can get to the meat and bones of the pilot episode. So okay, that's enough said. So to begin with, we have a pilot title of Countdown. Great title, contextually it makes sense within the episode. We have the episode length of 60 minutes and fine, that's okay. That's my cap. 60 minutes, great. And to be honest, it's actually more like 55, so even better. And finally, 3-Body Problem has a series length of 8 episodes. Okay, moving into the behind the scenes peeps. 3-Body Problem was written for the screen by David Benioff, D.B. Weiss and Alexander Wu, all 3 of which also stand as series creators and executive producers. Benioff and Weiss are both famously known for being the creators of Game of Thrones. Outside of the Game of Thrones, in terms of their writing credit, Benioff has written the Kite Runner film, Troy, as well as X-Men Origins, and Weiss, as well as Game of Thrones, also wrote Metal Lords. And then the third series creator and series writer, Wu, has also written Sleeper Cell, True Blood, and The Terror. Derek Tsang stands as director for the pilot episode Countdown, and Tsang has directed Good Take, Soulmate, and Better Days. Moving swiftly on to cast, first we have Xian Seng, who plays Yi Wenji, and she has starred in 2 shorts, On a Whim and Learning English. Next we have Jess Hong, who plays Jin, and Hong has starred in Creamery, The Broken Wood Mysteries, and Inked. Then we have Alex Sharp, who plays Will, and Sharp has starred in The Hustle, The Trial of the Chicago 7, One Life, and he starred in the unaired Game of Thrones prequel pilot. Is that House of Dragon? I'm not quite sure. Ether Gonzalez stars as Augie, and Gonzalez has also starred in I Care a Lot, Godzilla vs. Kong, and Ambulance. She also had a teeny tiny role in Prime Video's new Mr. and Mrs. Smith series, and she played the woman I thought that they were trying to use to represent Angelina Jolie's representation of Mrs. Smith in that role. If you listen to the podcast episode I did on that, that will all make sense. Also to note about Gonzalez is that she will be starring in the Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare, which is Guy Ritchie's new movie coming out hopefully this year, which also stars Henry Cavill. So can't wait to see her and him and some Guy Ritchie-ness later on this year. Okay, sorry, right, focus. Next we have Jovan Adepo, who plays Saul, and Adepo has starred in When They See Us, Tom Clancy's Jack Ryan, and Watchmen. John Bradley plays Jack, and Bradley is most known for starring in Game of Thrones, but he has also starred in the JLo movie Marry Me. And finally, Benedict Wong also stars in this pilot episode, and Wong is likely known to most for starring as Wong across the MCU, but as well as the multiple MCU movies and MCU TV series he starred in, he has also had roles in The Personal History of David Copperfield, Marco Polo, and Top Boy. And there we have it. Those are our main cast. For those of you who don't know, Three Body Problem is actually based on the novel by Cixin Liu, and I was actually tempted to read it. I did see one of the bookstagrammers, book people that I follow reading it, and just based on what they were saying as they were reading it, it kind of intrigued me into finding out a bit more. But you know what, time was fast spent, and one thing about me is that I have to read the book before I watch the film or watch the TV series, because otherwise I then start to imagine the actors as the characters in the books, and I just don't like doing that. So the only time I will eventually read the book after I've watched the film or TV series is if it's literally been decades. So that's just a little something about me. In terms of what made me want to watch the series, it's kind of a bit like what I was saying about the vibe I was getting from that book fluencer who was reading the book. I got the sense that it was a sort of weird, trippy, sci-fi, human condition. Is this real life or is this just fantasy malarkey? And I'm kind of into that, apparently. Apparently that's one of my things. And also, I don't know too much about what it's about, what Three Body Problem even means. And I love going to things blind, so this seemed like the perfect thing to walk into blind. Okay, it's time to talk about the first 10 minutes from the pilot episode of Three Body Problem, Countdown. Why the first 10 minutes, you ask? Well, because as a writer, it is your first and sometimes only chance to hook your reader and subsequently your audience into sticking with your story, especially in this day and age of scroll, TikTok, etc., etc. People's attention spans are just so short. There's just so much choice of what to watch. Hence the whole point of the pilot principle, judging a series by its pilot episode, because there are just so many other shows these days to choose from if you don't like that first episode. So yeah, that is why I look at the first 10 minutes of pilot episodes. So the first 10 minutes of Countdown goes like this. We start off in Beijing in 1966, and a crowd of revolutionists are playing judge, jury, and executioner to the counter-revolutionaryists. Stepping up to the guillotine is a professor of physics, Yi Zaitai, and his daughter, who is in tears, is in the crowd and is being held back from throwing herself on stage to save him. His wife then appears on stage and basically just dispels his beliefs and ends up standing and siding with the revolution. What are these beliefs? Well, they are the theory of relativity, the Big Bang Theory, just general physics. He signs his own death warrant in a sense by stating to the riotous crowd, science does not confirm nor deny the existence of God. From there, chanting ensues, down with academic institutions, rebellion is just, revolution is righteous, etc., etc., etc. The rebels who have dragged the professor on stage literally beat him to death. Later, when the crowd disperses, his daughter, Yi Wenji, sits with her father's body, but her mourning is cut short when the rebellion come to take her into custody. And then we go to the opening, which has a somber piano piece, which is a soothing balm to the violent intro. The images on screen are made up of pinpricks of light that transform into different things. Cells, bodies, a cityscape, the globe, the Milky Way. It's all very cerebral. After that intro, we come into London in 2024 and we see ambulance and police gathered outside a house. Then an organisation that is not part of Scotland Yard is on the scene, led by a man we later come to know as Clarence. Clarence is at the home of a scientist who studied cosmology and theoretical physics at MIT. Said scientist had no mental health history or suicidal tendencies, and the room that Clarence enters has numbers, a countdown written all over the walls in what looks like blood. And amongst the numbers, amongst the countdown, is a single phrase, "I still see it." We learn that this scientist had committed suicide just like the others. We then move on to Oxford University's particle accelerator, where we learn that a project led by Vera Yi has just been shut down. Saul, one of the scientists on the project, is despondent that none of their theories or the results from their experiment have proven conclusive. 60 years of hard work down the toilet. We then watch as Vera heads to the gated off part of the particle accelerator, steps off the edge and plunges to her death. And that is about the 12-minute mark. And I don't know about you, based on what I've just said, but I was definitely a little confused within those 12 minutes. I mean, I think I got the gist that science is broken and without it, people are hoping there is God. It's kind of like that scene in the Simpsons movie where the dome comes down over Springfield and then the people in the church run into the bar and then the people in the bar run into the church. I don't know if that makes sense or if that's what's going to happen, but that's just the first thing that came to my mind after watching those 10 minutes. And I will definitely say that after those 10 minutes, I am curious to see how things will unfold in the present day, as well as how 1960s China will link with 2024 England. You know, what's with the suicidal scientists and the mysterious organization investigating their death. So I'm confused, but not in a confusing way, which yes, does in fact sound confusing, and I'm going to try and stop using the word confusing for the rest of this episode. But I feel like I understand what's happening. The sequence of events that have been presented to me make sense. It's more so how do they all link together, and that is what's pulling me towards potentially continuing on with the rest of the episode. Now that we've got a little bit of context to how the pilot episode is starting to shape together, let's talk characters. As we don't really get too connected to many of the characters within the pilot episode, I've just sort of grouped them a bit in order to give the best overview possible for who they all are and how they link together. So we first start with 1960s China, where we meet Yi Wenji, and she is the daughter of the professor who was murdered on stage by the rebellion. So what I'll say about Wenji is that she's definitely fierce and she's determined and she stands up for what she believes in. She was stood amongst a crowd of rebels who were, you know, basically calling for the punishment of her father, but she's there trying to break free of the people around her and try and get to her father. So she clearly didn't care about the fact that she was on his side. Also, from the pilot episode, we understand that Wenji is on her own. I mean, her dad has died, her mum is spineless, and later on when she procures a lover, we then learn that he too is spineless. So definitely by the end of the pilot episode, we are feeling sorry for her, but we're also rooting for her to overcome the situation or the hand that life has dealt her. But one thing about her is that she's also a survivor. So I'm curious to know where her life leads, how she gets from point A to point B. I don't want to give too much away. We do get a hint within the pilot episode as to where her journey ends, but how she got from point A to point B is still to be explored, and something tells me that that exploration will be very, very interesting to watch. Okay, that's 1960s China. Let's fast forward to the present day, 2024, and look at the Oxford Five. So in the wake of Vera's suicide, we meet 5 friends who I believe studied together at some point. And within the episode, somebody dubs them the Oxford Five, and that name has now stuck with me. Okay, firstly, within the Oxford Five, we have Saul, who is a scientist, quoting pessimist, who is the fellow who is dejected when his and Vera's research is pulled at the Oxford Particle Accelerator. Next, we have Augie, and Augie, she's built her own company that works with nano nodes or something smart. Either way, she comes across as self-sufficient and determined and a go-getter, and we like her energy. I like her energy anyway. Next, we meet Jin, and I would call Jin the caring one. She is the only one to feel like there's more to Vera's death than meets the eye, even though she's not sure what that is. Next, we have Jack, who is the crude, self-absorbed friend who says whatever is on his mind, even when nobody wants to hear it. And finally, we have Will, who is broody, moony, and quiet. We don't get too much from Will and his scientific pursuits in the pilot episode. Right, now that I've broken down who everybody is, let me give you an idea of how they all interconnect. So Will is pining for Jin, who has moved on. We don't know what happened in the past between the two of them, if anything happened, but yes, Will is pining. Jin is like, Will who? Jack has left the scientific field and he's gotten rich making snacks. Jack Snacks, apparently the third most popular crisp flavour in the UK, after Walker's cheese and onion and Monster Munch barbecue beef flavour. So that was really random, made me chuckle. Jin and Augie seem to meet regularly and seem close, like real friend close. And then we've got Saul and Augie, who are in an on-again, off-again relationship that is currently off again, as of the pilot episode at least. Within the pilot episode, I would say the two most active characters are Jin and Augie. So with Jin, she, as I said, is more caring, and there is something about Vera's death that doesn't sit right with her. And so she does a little bit of casual digging when she visits Vera's mum. And when she asks Vera's mum if anything has changed with Vera in the days or months or weeks leading up to her suicide, Vera's mum presents Jin with this metallic headset that she calls a video game that Vera has been playing. Incidentally, this metallic headgear is something that Clarence's team is also after. Augie, on the other hand, is having a completely different experience to Jin at the moment. So Augie is seeing numbers in her mind sort of projected on wherever she settles her gaze. These numbers are counting down and they're scaring her. A stranger appears one night and tells her the numbers will go away if she stops her research, and she doesn't want to find out what happens when the numbers get to 0. And of course, Augie is suspicious about this, and then the woman says to her that she can give her a sign from the universe that what she's saying is true. The last thing to mention about the Oxford Five is just that it'll be interesting to see how or if all these 5 characters will come together and unite for some reason, somehow, in some way, whether that's to solve what's going on with Augie or to talk about what Jin has discovered. And the last character to talk about is Clarence, who works for the Strategic Intelligence Agency, who are on the lookout for suspicious signs involving scientists at the mysterious request of Clarence's mysterious boss. And as I said, one of the things that they are also after is this weird silver metal console that looks like a tricked out Facebook Meta device. In terms of Clarence's character, though, we don't really get a sense of what that is, but we also learn from the pilot episode that maybe he's a bit of a rebel, or he becomes too invested in the job, or he's willing to go outside of the lines to get things done, because we hear that he has been fired from Scotland Yard and MI5 and or 6, and that is how he ended up working at the Strategic Intelligence Agency. And his job could possibly be on the line if he doesn't find the information his mysterious sponsor is after. And there we have it. Those are all our main characters / principal players. And we don't have an antagonist. And you know what? I'm glad, because there are a lot of people. I'm not even going to bother trying to think of some metaphysical antagonist for you, like space-time continuum. No. Let's just put a pin in things there. Now it is time for a quick interlude to see what TV and film life is looking like beyond the pilot principle. And it's been a while, and so there's quite a lot to catch you up on, starting with books. We are still in March, and so it is still romance reading month, where I basically devour romance books like they're going out of style. And you know what? It's just really easy to do, because I'm not gonna lie, it's all copy and paste to a certain extent. There's no big surprise at the end. The two love interests will in fact end up with each other at the end of the book. We just watch along and see how they get there. That's basically all we do. So here's a quick run through of the romance books that I have been reading or read this month. So I have finished Nora Goes Off Script by Annabelle Monaghan. I have also finished Priest by Sierra Simone. And I've also finished Get a Life, Chloe Brown by Talia Hibbert. And I've also finished How to Catch a Queen by Alyssa Cole. I'm currently reading The Davenports by Crystal Marquise, and I'm currently listening to Check and Mate by Ali Hazelwood. Whew! In regards to TV, I have finished watching Harlan Coben's Safe over on Netflix. man, that was wild. And that's saying something. But I mean, I'm glad I watched it. It was the exact kind of television that I was after. Something almost page turning, but like the TV version of page turning. It was, in fact, ridiculous. The lengths that people go to keep secrets. I mean, you've got that mixture of what are the kids up to, the past mixing with the present, and things being unearthed, things being buried, and people having their own secrets. And you're just yelling at these characters the entire time for the stupidness that they're doing to themselves. But it was fun. I had a good time. Now I've seen all of the Principal, Harlan Coben English language shows that are available on Netflix. So yeah, pat me on the back. I'm still in the process of watching Mary and George over on Sky Atlantic, and I am 3 episodes deep. I'm just doing this week by week, to be honest. All episodes are in fact available to watch on demand, but I don't have time for that. So I'm just enjoying a weekly episode. Sometimes I'll watch 2, skip a week, whatever. But I will say, so far, I am enjoying this crazy period drama. And then the only other thing I've been watching, which I started recently and basically binged in 2 days, bar the last 2 episodes, and that is Death and Other Details, which is currently available on Disney Plus in the UK, but I believe already aired on Hulu late last year. But that's just how they do sometimes. They just keep us in suspense. They don't give us the good stuff. Death and Other Details is it's not a locked room mystery. I cannot remember the name of it, but it's kind of like Murder on the Orient Express or Death on the Nile or And Then There Were None, where you have a bunch of people trapped in a specific location and nobody can get in or out. And so the murder mystery takes place in this specific circumstance. So you know, for example, that the murderer is on board and then victims are like dying left, right and centre. It's a wild ride. I would kind of call it Knives Out meets Death on the Nile meets Only Murders in the Building meets something sexy. And last but not least, in terms of film, I did in fact get round to seeing Bob Marley, One Love. That was a nice time. It was kind of like going to a music concert, but at the same time watching a biography, but also learning about Rastafarian culture. It was all kinds of things in one. Wasn't mad at it. Super random. Super random. Couldn't quite catch the tone that they were going for. It was heavy, then it was light. But you know what? It was a good time. There's not actually much out in cinema at the moment for the rest of the month, and I'm sort of craving the darkness. So I'm really looking forward to what April has in store for cinema goings. But back to the films that I have watched. I also watched Irish Wish on Netflix. I'm here for Lindsay Lohan's renaissance back into acting. Is it going to be the best film you've ever watched? No. No, it won't. But if you're sat around with a bunch of friends on a casual Saturday afternoon, kind of talking through it, kind of making fun of it, kind of going, oh, that's so cute. Like it was nice for what it was. It's kind of like watching Hallmark movies. You don't expect them to win Oscars, do you? You know what you're there for. So I knew what I was getting out of Irish Wish, and it was great to see Lindsay Lohan, that lovely red hair paired with emerald greens and royal blues. And that's all I've seen of late. Although I'm hoping to catch Roadhouse, which is now out on Amazon Prime, seeing how Jake Gyllenhaal takes on that story. I don't know if it's a spin-off or if it's inspired by or if it's a remake of the 80s classic that originally starred Patrick Swayze. All I know is that I'm going to be watching it. Before we head back to your regularly scheduled listening, don't forget to follow at Pilot Principle on Instagram and Twitter/X, where we can chat about the latest in film and TV and books. In terms of what I liked about the pilot episode of 3 Body Problem Countdown, first one as always is a bit random, and there is a scene where Jack and Will are in the toilets and they're just having a bit of a gossip and a natter. And I love that because normally we depict women as the ones who are just having a bit of a chit chat and like a check-in or like a debrief in the toilets. But surely men do it too, right? Like, why wouldn't you? Especially when you're by yourself and you've got something to share with your friend, and like, why would you not? So yeah, I don't know, really random thing, but I liked that. But also what I enjoyed, specifically plot-wise, there is a bit in the pilot episode, of course, where Jin is trying to explain to Augie what is currently happening right now in the world of physics. And Jin is explaining that every particle accelerator in the world, not just the one in Oxford, is acting strangely, and that the experiments that they are running are supposed to teach them how the universe works, but the results they're getting is like Alice in Wonderland. And I was like, whoa, not Alice in Wonderland. I just think that it painted a really good picture of the scientific status of things, even though I didn't quite fully understand. I don't know what a particle accelerator is. The only thing I know about particle accelerators is that that's what gave Barry Allen his powers in The Flash, right? That's that's all I know about them. So this whimsical visual of what was going on, I think, was a really good way to just sort of quickly inject it into the audience's mind, to just give them the sense of things, even if they don't quite understand the science. On the flippity flip side, in terms of what I didn't quite like, you know what? I couldn't quite work out the pace. We had an intense opening with the rebels and the counter-revolutionists, etc., etc., etc. And then it kind of just ebbs and doesn't quite flow, which I think is kind of odd because Augie has this countdown ticking in her visual mind's eye, or however you describe that. And she doesn't seem very worried. The concept of time, the concept that it is a countdown, isn't really verbalized until close to the end. And we do hear that Augie has gone to see a neurologist, but like, is that it? Like, is that all you've done? Like, I don't know. It just felt very vanilla. Maybe it just sounded too real, you know? There was nothing for her to like run away and do an adventure about and discover. She just is just waiting for whatever it is to just stop. But we didn't really get a sense that she was anxious about it reaching zero or what have you. And I think that would have been nice to sort of amp up the pace and have us being like, oh my gosh, are we reaching zero? And I think that's part of the reason the pace just didn't quite sit right for me within the pilot episode. Okay, this is new. Let me know if you like this or if you don't like this and you want this removed. But let's look at and take into consideration the series synopsis before we think about the pilot and how the pilot has done as a whole. So this is the series synopsis. Scientists are drawn into an all-consuming game where they must solve a riddle and save a civilization. In this sci-fi mystery thriller, chaos awaits. I'll just let that sit with you as I remind you about the synopsis for the pilot episode, Countdown. Unsettling events put a group of brilliant friends on edge as a mystery unravels with origins tracing back to China during the Cultural Revolution. In terms of the writing, I think the writing was fine, nothing to write home about. Pun intended. In terms of the setting, I do wish that I got more of a sense of location from London and Oxford and Beijing. I think some establishers would have been nice because we didn't really have any. As I just talked about in terms of pace, it was slower than I thought it should be, specifically when it came to certain plot points. And in terms of the serial arc, from what I gather, science is broken and the Oxford Five are going to fix it. Maybe something to do with time travel from 1966 China to 2024 England. Not really sure, to be honest. I think the theories on where the series could go could very quickly get quite wild. I mean, the show's synopsis talks about saving a civilization. I'm like, which civilization? Why does it need saving? Who is trying to kill science? Is it religion? See, all I have are questions. I don't even have speculation, just questions. And in terms of what we get from the series synopsis, put together with what we get from the pilot episode, I think we're hovering over the first step to see how the two marry together. But honestly, I would never have guessed from the pilot episode that, you know, riddles and civilizations and games were going to be involved at all. And finally, in terms of the end of episode hook, Augie is sent a sign from the universe as the stars in the sky blink in and out, sending a numerical sequence that matches with the countdown in her head, which currently stands at 10 minutes. I think it's 10 minutes if I read the numbers correctly. And that is the end of episode hook. Which means there's now only one question left to ask. Will I be continuing with 3 body problem? Pause for dramatic effect. Yes. Firstly, because I am so lost right now, but in a good way. Secondly, and I could be very wrong about this, but I'm getting time travel signs from the pilot episode. And if there's one thing to know about me, I love a time travel plot line. Again, Could be completely wrong about this, but that's what I'm getting. And so that's another reason for me to continue watching Three Body Problem. And the last reason that I'll be continuing is that even though we don't get much from the characters in regards to their reactions to conflicts, I do wonder how they will react, especially as things come to light, whatever those things are. How will they come together as a group? Who will rise as a leader? Who will fall as a Judas? But that is, of course, just me. If you like your mysteries more cut and dry and predictable, then Three Body Problem will not be for you. If you prefer the central focus of a police investigation and not having civilians go around saving the day, then again, you might not enjoy what the pilot episode has set up. And finally, if you are easily confused, then do not make Three Body Problem your problem. All that is left to do is to give the pilot episode Countdown a pilot score, and for me, it gets a 3 out of 5. I think there's a good balance of the past and the present that was really well done, and they did a good job of linking the two timelines as well and sort of giving us a semblance of closure at the end of the pilot episode, which I respected. There are a lot of characters introduced in episode 1, with the Oxford Five and Wenji and Clarence, who works for the Strategic Intelligence Agency. But we do get a very quick and good understanding of these characters' personalities and the relationships, especially amongst the Oxford Five. I will also say that they were a good sprinkling of scenes that were sort of trippy and teased elements to entice you as an audience into finding out what the fudge cake is going on. Props where props is due, and for me, that's originality. But as curious as I am, I wasn't necessarily itching to press play on episode 2. And I will say that I did feel a little bit weightless in the pilot episode. Who is the principal character? Who is supposed to be guiding us through this very confusing concept? I don't think that was made particularly clear in episode 1, which is where it kind of loses points for me. I will say at the end of the pilot episode, there was a sneaky, cheeky little this series on Three Body Problem, which I didn't watch. But, I, in this case, can see why they may have put it there, because as it stands after the pilot episode, a little perspective of the grand plan wouldn't go amiss. Now that we've hashed out the fundamental principles, will you be giving the pilot episode a watch? Or have you already binged every episode of Three Body Problem? Follow and chat to me over on Threads, Instagram and Twitter/X at Pilot Principle, and I will catch you on the next episode. Aww.